You are tuned in to the Monday Night Carlo, Sports and Entertainment Sportscast. And now, without further ado, I give to you the one and only Carlo.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Monday Night Carlo, and it's going to be a fun episode. I really want to have a good chat with this man. He's a good man. I love the podcast he does. The podcast he does is called Gorilla Position, which is available on the most listened to sports show on radio, Talk Sports Gorilla Position, and his name is James Delow, and he's on the line right now. James, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I mean, this is a big thing for me because it was by total fault that I came across the podcast, to be honest. One day I was going to go in between podcasts and I came across iTunes and came across the Gorilla Position podcast on Twitter that I've never seen TalkSport talk about wrestling before until you guys came along with your show. So tell us a little bit about you and kind of what inspired you to bring us the podcast.
Well, I've always been a fan of WWE,
yes,
and wrestling in general. It kind of caught my imagination at an early age. I would say probably I was maybe 6 or 7, and it was just that thing of watching. I think it was WCW at the time.
Yes.
In the middle of the night on Saturdays, they used to play WCW Pro with Jim Ross as the host, and I just fell in love with it for reasons that are still not massively clear to me. But I just, I guess like yourself, if you've been a fan for a long time, it's kind of something that you either get and it kind of gets in your blood at an early age or it doesn't. And it certainly did with me, and I was just a big fan, and I've never left it really. I've followed. I jumped ship from WCW to
right.
WWE,
yes.
or WWF as it was, around kind of 92, 93. So I jumped ship to WWF, and then I just have followed it my entire life. And I work in television, I work in production. I'm a TV producer, and I run a production company in London. And
very cool.
We were working with some clients who thought would kind of marry up very well with WWE content. Like we worked with MTV and the Sun newspaper, and I just thought, I'm all about spreading the good word WWE here in the UK. And so I just thought I'd kind of marry the two. And so I started working with WWE and producing content for them and spreading it across our various clients, which now includes TalkSport, and now we do the weekly show for them. So it's all taken a long time, but it's good.
That's very interesting. So you actually work for the WWE, and you kind of brought your products or your ideas to TalkSport then, yeah?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't work for WWE. I just work very closely with them.
Okay.
They have a London office, and I guess you could say WWE are one of our clients. Our production company is called Starstruck Media, and we are all about the kind of showbiz and the entertainment, and we do a lot of film and comedy content across kind of TV and various platforms, and so just producing WWE content just made total sense. So we have been granted really good access over the past few years. We've been to the WrestleManias and the SummerSlam, and I've been backstage at various events. And I think we've just built up a really nice working relationship with WWE, and they trust us to produce good, positive stuff for them. And it's good. It's working well.
It's funny that you mentioned about kind of catching your eye as a kid, because I was around 8 or 9 years old when I was kind of flicking through the channels as a kid, as you do on a Saturday. And I came across, the very first thing I came across, James, believe it or not, was WrestleMania 6, the main event, Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior. And I just turned the TV over, and it was literally the point where they were just having the face-off in the middle of the ring. And can you imagine that as a kid, just me watching that?
That's quite an intense first image to take
exactly.
in of WWF, isn't it? Where was that? Toronto, I think that show was.
That was the Sky Dome. I went to Toronto just to literally visit the Sky Dome, just to say I've been.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, what a great moment to become a fan.
So how is it to actually kind of? I'm guessing you've met a lot of the guys as well. I mean, I've come across your YouTube videos as well. When you first kind of interviewed these guys, does it prove to be a little bit intimidating? How did you find it as a person?
It's really strange. I kind of my job generally means I have to meet a lot of kind of celebrities. We do a lot of film content, so I'm interviewing kind of Hollywood A-listers quite often, and so
Right.
I don't really get massively starstruck unless I'm a proper fan of somebody. Like, I love my comedy, and so meeting people like Ricky Gervais and Steve Coogan was a really big kind of thrill for me. But kind of over the years, I've kind of got used to meeting celebrities, as it were. And I think I kind of went into interviewing WWE talents fairly easily because I knew I was knowledgeable about the subject.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't worry that I was going to get flustered and not know what I was talking about, or I kind of had a million questions in my head anyway, so wherever the conversation went, I knew I would be able to ride along with it. So I never got too nervous, but the first time we covered a WWE event was WrestleMania 29 in New York.
Right.
And it was this press trip that we did was kind of so last minute. I mean, I literally found out I was going. It was up in the air for a few weeks, and there was a possibility that I was going to be going, but I found out that I was definitely going to be going the morning I went.
Right.
So I was working in London in the office. My wife had to bring me my suitcase, and then I literally went straight to the airport and flew to New York, and then literally landed and then went straight to one of their charity red carpet events. And then it was kind of a whole weekend of stuff. So I was kind of really thrown in at the deep end. And so in a sense, didn't really have time to be nervous, but, it was pretty cool meeting all these people that you see on TV, and, cause so many of them I really admire.
So have you kind of met anybody? I mean, I saw your video with Randy Orton, where it's kind of weird because you were kind of saying about kayfabe and he didn't know how to take it. And
yeah, he wasn't a big fan of me.
I was going to say, is he the only one you've kind of encountered that, he didn't like you, or you kind of rubbed up the wrong way, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that was the only moment of genuine beef that I've had with anyone. I mean, to be honest, there's a possibility I'm going to be interviewing him at the end of this week.
Right.
And that would be the first time I've interviewed him since then. I think that was SummerSlam 2013 in Los Angeles. And so, he's not going to remember me. He's not going to even think twice about it. But for me, it was a bit of a moment, because I thought, I really don't want to piss off Randy Orton. And I didn't mean to. I was just kind of bringing to his attention how many fans online thought that incident in South Africa where he got attacked by a fan.
Yes.
I was just bringing to his attention that so many people thought it was a work, as it were, and he just, but I guess if you're physically attacked and it's not part of the storyline, I guess it's going to be a bit of a touchy subject.
So let's talk about wrestling, man. We've got to get to this, because I would like to know your take on today's WWE and what you think of it, because for me, there was a period back, say, 2009 and 10, where we kind of have a whole year of John Cena versus Randy Orton, and it was kind of getting a bit stale. But I think now, as a product myself, I think the product is so much better, and it's kind of in a transition period where we've got so many new wrestlers and new faces, and now they're kind of coming into their own, whether it be Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, whoever. How do you feel, James, about the product as a whole?
I mean, definitely there was a sort of stale period that 2009, 2010 period you mentioned, was possibly a bit stale with lots of rematches, as you said. And also I think before then, kind of, I remember 2006, 2007 just being a bit sluggish, and they didn't really have many stars coming through. But I think now the product, I mean, there are so many people kind of online and on podcasts and stuff who just berate the product, and
yes,
they want to slag off the creatives, and and I guess I don't work to the same sort of level in any way whatsoever, but as a kind of TV producer, I know how hard it is to produce regular content, and the amount of TV shows they're producing every single week is like, it's like 10 hours or 13 or 14 hours a week if there's a big pay-per-view on. And then you got all the, the kickoff shows and the fallout. So much content to be churning out. So I always get slightly annoyed if if fans online are just ripping apart the creative or the storylines just for the sake of it, because I think there is so much to enjoy. And I think the product now is, I'm 32, so there's a lot in the product that I don't enjoy. I would say there's probably 40% of it that's just not for me. The silly stuff, the over-the-top kind of cartoon characters. There's a lot less of them now than there were, but there's still elements of the product I don't hugely enjoy. But that's just because I don't kind of fall into that demographic. Whereas I do find a lot of pleasure in watching people like Brock Lesnar, Daniel Bryan, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, Wade Barrett. I think the roster they have now is brilliant, and there are so many stars coming through, especially with the NXT system. I just think it's, I don't know, I think it's a bright future for WWE.
I also feel like, the thing is, James, I also feel like it's a bit like Star Wars when you're a kid, You watch Star Wars when you're a kid, and you're obviously going to love it a lot more than you are. No, I mean, I'm 35 and I'm exactly in the same boat, There are parts and elements to it that, obviously, with my age, basically we're grown up, James, is the bottom line, right?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you go that far, but yeah.
But you know what I mean, that obviously seeing it through a kid's eyes is going to be a lot more different to seeing it through an adult's eyes. We enjoy it, but in a lot more kind of different way.
Yeah, but also, I think it's funny you should say that, because I feel like I do appreciate the product as a whole, even though personally I may not enjoy certain elements of it. Like when I've been at the live shows, I think it was maybe SummerSlam last summer when it was Brock Lesnar, John Cena in the main event, which was I just thought that the narrative running through that match was just beautifully told. I think, props to John Cena for allowing them to show him up in that fashion and, have Brock just destroy him for 20 minutes. But in the crowd, I was sat right next to some really young John Cena fans who were, coated head to toe in, Cena merchandise. But it was really interesting to watch the kids in the crowd and see how emotionally invested they are in it. And it makes you appreciate, I don't know, I guess how many demographics WWE has to cater for and how well it does on so many levels, really.
How do you feel about when you see, one question I really wanted to ask was this one, but how do you feel about when you see Steve Austin with his podcast and putting his podcast so boldly as to put it live on air, on video, kind of straight after Raw? Do you think that kind of opening up wrestling so boldly as to put it straight after that live on the network, do you think that's a good thing for wrestling itself?
I think it's a really interesting subject. It's something that me and a guy who I have on my podcast, a guy called Rob Lee, who's he used to be a showbiz journalist for The Mirror, and he's now working for us, and he's producing lots of WWE content for the Sun newspaper here in the UK and Talk Sports and MTV. So he's again, like me and you, just been a fan kind of all his life, and we've discussed. Probably not at length as much as we'd like to, but we certainly will touch on the subject in later shows. But we've kind of discussed briefly, is it a good thing that WWE are kind of opening up the...
Yes.
Peeling back the curtain, as it were.
I think the thing is, James, that what I mean by this question is, if you think about it, your podcast and other podcasts like Talk is Jericho or whatever podcast you're listening to, that is your choice. To go to iTunes on your iPhone and listen to it as an iPod is your choice to do that. But to put the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast as so boldly as to put it straight on after Raw, there's going to be a lot more watches to that. So there's a lot more eyes and ears on that. So do you think that's, asking those big questions to Vince and Triple H, do you think that works,
Yeah, I think it's probably a very good business decision, having connections with Steve Austin, and obviously he's still got a huge built-in audience, and hundreds of thousands of people listen to his podcast every week. So I can completely understand why they've done it, and keeping Steve Austin part of the company and everything. It's it is strange how much they've opened it up because, you know, in a sense, you watch Raw and you see the storylines play out, and then immediately after you'll have them kind of breaking it down. You know, it's like a sort of watching Breaking Bad on Netflix and then watching a sort of debate show. What was it? Talking Bad or something? They had like a spin-off.
That's right. Yes.
Debate show on Breaking Bad, and I guess it's no different from that. And if people are going to watch it and enjoy it, then that's a good thing. And if they're going to make money, then great. And if it's going to get a lot of eyeballs and earballs, as it were, then I think it's good. But yeah, it's an interesting debate as to how open the business is now, because they make no bones about it. It's an entertainment juggernaut. You know, it's a written live athletic soap opera. They all play characters, and I get, you know, they can't say anything else at this juncture. So I think if they're going to make some extra money and do some good business by opening it up even further, then, you know, that's what they're going to do, I guess.
And I think that's funny because when I saw the Stone Cold podcast with Triple H, and the first thing he said was, "Is kayfabe dead?" I wonder what Vince McMahon's reaction would have been to that.
Well, yeah, I said on our podcast, when I watched the Triple H one specifically, I was thinking all the way through, what's Vince thinking of this?
Yes.
You know, is he listening intently to every word that's coming out of Triple H's mouth? Because Triple H must go on that set knowing that Vince is going to know exactly what he's going to be saying. So yeah, it's a funny old deal. But I mean, I personally love the shows, and I think, you know, I think they're fascinating. And I think something Sam Roberts said, who has another great podcast called the Sam Roberts Wrestling Show. He said back in the day, you know, the likes of you and I, when we were teenagers, we would have things like Beyond the Mat, the famous wrestling documentary, and then Wrestling with Shadows, the Bret Hart documentary, but kind of this generation's version of that are things like, you know, all these podcasts and the Q&As with Vince and Triple H and everything that Steve Austin and Jericho, and obviously the CM Punk podcast that opened up a lot of things. So it's this generation's version of what we had with those old school documentaries, I think.
I'd love to know your take on CM Punk and, you know, what you think, and whether you think he's going to come back to wrestling.
Well, they say never, don't they, in WWE? I think stranger things have happened. You know, just being around for WrestleMania 30 weekend and seeing Ultimate Warrior being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and then watching that WWE 24 documentary on the network where you sort of see him and Hulk Hogan backstage making amends, and you know, so you kind of think if the likes of, and Bruno Sammartino as well being inducted, I think the year before or 2 years before. So I think when there's business to be done, I think they'll always find a way of making it work, or Triple H will. Specifically, because he seems to be the builder of bridges nowadays.
Yes.
But I think, you know, speaking personally, CM Punk was one of my favourites. He very much tailed off in the last year, I think. I didn't really think much of his program with Ryback and Paul Heyman. I think the way that all ended, it was just a bit of a flat conclusion to a fairly standard program. But I think he's had some brilliant programs, and I just love his attitude. I love his music. I love his look. He's just, you know, he speaks to people our age, I guess. I don't know if you feel the same, but it's, he was amazing. And I think he was brilliant. And personally, I feel very sad that, for example, we're not going to see him at this year's WrestleMania. Yes. You know, as a fan, I want to see him come back. I want to see that crowd reaction. I mean, I was at a Raw in Chicago last March, so pretty much this time last year, and it was the first show in Chicago since Punk had left 2 months prior, and there was all this talk that he was going to be returning, and I was there doing an interview backstage with someone, and I was sort of over the moon because I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be here for Punk returning. And obviously he didn't. We know how it went down. Yes. And Paul Heyman came. They started the show. They played Punk's music, and Paul Heyman came down instead. But the reaction that just there's the hit of that music, Cult of Personality, the reaction that got from the Chicago crowd when they thought he might be there was just unbelievable. And it was one of those goosebumps on the back of your neck moments. It was kind of almost quite emotional for me. I get quite emotional if I'm in a crowd and and the reaction is so amazing. It kind of reminds me why I'm a fan and why for all these years I've been a fan. And so as a fan, I'm sad about the fact that we're not going to have a WrestleMania moment with Punk headlining and an awesome storyline built in. But having said that, as I've said on the podcast, I think maybe at WrestleMania 32, possibly 33, I don't know, I'm sure he could come back.
The name's Newcomb, Duke Nukem. And when I'm not kicking ass and chewing gum, I'm listening to Monday Night Carlo. Let's rock.
So let's talk a little bit. We need to talk about the Royal Rumble, and I'd love to know. I've heard a little bit of what you guys said on your show, but just kind of let me know what you thought of the Royal Rumble as a match. The
actual Rumble match?
Yes.
It's difficult. I mean, again, I don't want to be insulting the product. I know. I mean, obviously a Rumble match is difficult to book just because there's 30 guys, you're trying to intertwine loads of stories, you're trying to spark new feuds off and end feuds and make things lead to WrestleMania, and so there's so much kind of at play during one hour match. I mean, I think compared to other Rumbles, it was fairly poor. I didn't think many storylines progressed. I hated how Daniel Bryan got eliminated, not only so early, but just so rubbishly. Do you know what I mean?
Not only Daniel, though. I mean, there's a lot of, like, even Dolph Ziggler and people like that, he's so easily getting thrown over the top.
Yeah, just being dumped, I think he got knocked out by Big Show, much like he did on Fastlane last night as well. He just got knocked out by Show and then just dropped over the ropes, as though he was just a sack of rubbish. And it was like, I think I saw on Twitter that night, that elimination, and was it Dean Ambrose's elimination as well?
That's right, yes.
People were saying that was basically just Vince coming out onto the stage and, flipping the middle finger to the crowd. Which, I don't know if you should read too much into that, but so, I mean, the Rumble match itself, I was very, very disappointed in. Obviously, the crowd killed it because they didn't get to see what they wanted to see, and that had a huge impact on the performers in the ring. I think it took everyone by surprise. Rock
definitely took the Rock by surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. He wasn't looking too happy, and that's a tough situation for him to be in as well. He's a big Hollywood player. He was I think he's the world's highest paid actor in 2013. And so I think when he comes back to WWE, the moments need to be special, and they need to be, positive, I guess. And I think they put him in a bit of a tough situation by trying to put over Roman Reigns in such an obvious fashion.
How do you feel about Daniel Bryan as a whole and the direction they're kind of giving him now?
Well, I mean, I don't know what direction he's going to be going in. I've heard rumblings of Dolph Ziggler at WrestleMania, which as a match I would love to see, obviously.
Yes.
I think it's two guys who would go out there on the main stage and just kill it. I think if they, give them 25 minutes, half an hour, they will just tear the place down and have an absolutely killer match. And those are the kind of matches that I love as a fan, So I think that could be really special. As a character, I think he's slightly relying too heavily on the yes chant. I feel like his character hasn't evolved hugely recently. I like that he's come back and he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder and he wants his title back. But I don't feel like they're pushing him as far as he could be pushed in terms of a character. We're not really getting to know anything new about Daniel Bryan, and we haven't for a long time. But I think he's great. He's one of my favourites. Him and CM Punk are the two performers that over the last couple of years have really, really captured my imagination.
Great wrestler,
yeah, I mean, he's just phenomenal, and I love that he's come through the indie circuits and he can. I mean, Fastlane last night was a great example of how brilliant he was. John Cena and Rusev were in the penultimate spot, And, they had a good match, and the crowd woke up for that match, luckily, because they were pretty quiet for the rest of the night.
Yeah, they were, yeah.
But, it was a strange one. But, John Cena and Rusev put on a good match, although there was a lot of spot calling from Cena, which infuriated me. Because I was watching on the network and I had my headphones in, so, I watched on
right.
my laptop. And I could just hear him saying to Rusev, shoulder tackle. And then,
really?
If you watch it back, and then, he's even got Rusev in the STF, and he yells in his ear, reach for the ropes.
Oh,
and I just think, and you completely get taken out of the moment when you see something like that.
Yeah.
But then you compare that to Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns in the main event, and there was not one moment of that. These guys just went out there, worked their tails off, sold beautifully. I thought Roman Reigns was brilliant in that position where he was kind of selling the hernia injury and stuff. And, so it's kind of testament to how good Daniel Bryan is. I just think he's a one-of-a-kind performer.
I think it's really easy to give Roman Reigns a lot of stick as a fan, but I actually really like him, and I think that as a performer, he proved, not only last night, but I think he's slowly improving as he goes along. He's got a lot to learn, but what are your thoughts on him, James?
Well, I mean, he's got a lot to learn, but he's really young, and he hasn't been doing this very long. He's only, to think he debuted in 2012, at the very end of 2012. So, he's only had a couple of years on the main roster. And I think he's brilliant. And I think, obviously, he's not there in terms of a character. He hasn't done that kind of Stone Cold Steve Austin thing where he had a journey of a couple of years to reach the title. Because obviously he's had the backing of the Shield up until now. But, it seems that he's being thrust into the title picture on his own, very quickly, and probably too quickly. But at the end of the day, he's a great performer. If they let him be himself, he will evolve on the mic and he'll start doing promos. So I think he's great. He's a natural in the ring as well.
The funny thing is, James, I saw his interview with you when you were talking to him backstage on YouTube, and he seems like such a charismatic guy, and it's such a shame in a way that we haven't kind of evolved into what he wants to be. Because I just wonder myself whether he would still have the whole Shield gimmick if he had kind of creative control.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, he's very charismatic. I mean, I've interviewed him a couple of times, once with the Shield boys just before they broke up, actually.
Right.
And then one with him on his own, over WrestleMania weekend last year. But he's a really nice guy. And also we were at the SummerSlam, it was the roster reveal for the 2K15 game in LA last August. And he was just on stage, and obviously there was no script or promos he was doing. He was just out there on stage with a cast of other WWE superstars, and Steve Austin was hosting. And he was having great, I hate to use the word banter, but he was having really good banter with Steve Austin, and showed himself up to be a really, really funny guy. So I think, as long as they can avoid suckering Succotash and, all these old school references that are clearly written by Vince, then I think, he'll be really good. And what I loved, actually, as much as I would love to have seen Daniel Bryan in the main event again this year, I loved that Bryan was used as a main event guy, putting over Reigns in the right way, and crucially making Reigns look like $1 million.
Yeah, that would definitely, that set him on his way for WrestleMania now. Do you think he will win the title at WrestleMania then?
I think so. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Brock potentially staying because he's enjoying his run at WWE so much. But then there's also rumours that he's got unfinished business. That was the quote, I think.
That's right. Yes.
Triple H. So is it unfinished business in WWE or unfinished business in UFC? You don't know. I personally would be surprised if he went back to mixed martial arts, just because I think he's getting on a bit. He's had some serious health issues in the past, and I think, a further run for WWE when he can choose his own dates is, I don't know, surely that would be the way to go. Unless you've got some kind of deep-rooted thing within you that makes you think, oh no, I need to go back to the competitive, world of mixed martial arts. And unless he's got that inside him, which he may very well do. But, I'd love to see him stay. And if he does, then maybe we see a shock victory for Brock. I don't know. But I actually, now that the match is set in stone and the question marks have gone, i.e. will Daniel Bryan be involved, I think now we can just sit back and enjoy Paul Heyman working his magic. And I'm actually looking forward to the next 5 weeks because I think it will be crucial in the fans getting behind Reigns and, building the match up properly.
I think it's going to be a great WrestleMania, and it's kind of leading up to that as well. How do you find Paul to interview? What's he actually like? It seems to me like he loves to kind of play and toy with you a little bit, and I like that myself. How do you find him?
It's a funny one with Paul Heyman because you can tell he's a really nice guy. I think he really, he is a nice guy.
Yes.
But whenever I've interviewed him, and I've interviewed him a couple of times now, he'll just stay in character, and he won't break that. And it's sort of annoying in a way because it really limits what you can ask. Do you know what I mean? Because if you sort of ask him about his personal life or whatever, it just, or whatever I threw at him, he just responded in character. And it's fun, it creates some fun moments, but I would love to sit down with Paul for, half an hour or an hour and just have the real Paul, because he is a fascinating guy. He's a real, to me, it sounds strange, but he's quite an inspiration. Just knowing his story, knowing what, the WCW documentary they did, The Rise and Fall, ECW, The Rise and Fall of ECW DVD they did was just so good, and hearing his story and hearing him talk so passionately about that. And then also in the
ECW,
the new one.
Yes, on the network. That was amazing. The ECW, what was it called? Confidential. Yes.
Oh no, I haven't even seen that one.
You haven't seen that? Yeah, it's on the WWE.
No, that's
network.
like a live thing they did, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah, and they had kind of Twitter questions, and Joey Styles was there as well. You need to check that out. That was amazing. Okay,
yeah, I definitely will. But I watched the most recent documentary they did, Ladies and Gentlemen, My Name is Paul Heyman.
Yes.
And he's just such an engaging character, and he talks in such a I don't know, just a really sort of educated, intelligent way. So I'm just fascinated by him, and I'd love to talk to him out of character. It was funny because I interviewed him just before, I think it was the day before WrestleMania, and obviously that's broke the streak. And during the interview, he was saying, well, my client Brock Lesnar is going to end the streak of The Undertaker. And I look back at it now and I was really sarcastic. I was like, okay, Paul, all right, yeah, sure. just thinking, the streak's never going to be broken. And then after the event, he actually tweeted me with a link to the YouTube video saying, I told you so. And so that was really cool. So I was really pleased that he sort of remembered our interview and what he'd said. But, Paul Heyman's amazing, and I can't wait to see what he's going to do over the next 5 weeks building up to Mania.
Do you think maybe a future guest for you on your show?
Well, very, very possibly. We're really lucky to work so closely with WWE. We've got some great guests coming up. As I said, I'm potentially in New York this weekend interviewing some of the superstars backstage at Madison Square Garden, which will be amazing. So we're really lucky. So
can you give us a little taster maybe of what's coming up on your show, or?
Well, in terms of talent names, I don't know exactly because it chops and changes all the time in terms of who's available. But I've sort of given WWE a wish list of people I really want to interview. But I know Daniel Bryan, Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, Paige, people like that are all on the list, and that's who we're trying to work to get over the next few weeks and months. And also, people who do other podcasts I'm really interested to speak to, people who are maybe kind of outside the industry a little bit, but still kind of work within it, the likes of Jim Ross and Steve Austin. And also I've got an interview with Ed Ferrara coming up, who I interviewed in Orlando a few weeks ago. And he's a great guy and really, really interesting to talk to, because obviously he was one of the head writers alongside Vince Russo.
Yes.
For Raw, back when the Attitude Era was at its height, and he was there for things like the death of Owen Hart and the rise of Steve Austin and, all these sort of monumental things that happen in the industry at such a kind of crucial time. And, the Monday Night Wars were in the swing of things. So he's a really great guy to chat with. And we sat down for like an hour and a half and talked. So I'll probably do that as a 2-parter coming up in a couple of weeks, possibly even this week, actually. I haven't worked out my schedule yet, but, there's some cool things coming up on the show.
That's funny that you mentioned Paige, because she's a local girl for me. I'm from Norwich as well, so that's great. That's great to see her doing so well, and it's also cool to see your banter with her on your videos.
She's really fun, and she's just, it's funny with Paige because I feel like she's not quite media trained, which is lovely. Do you know what I mean? Like, so yes. You don't always, you're not always going to get the same answers. Nothing's too rehearsed. She's literally just being herself. She's loving life. She's young. She's free. She's single. She's just moved to America. She's doing her dream job. She's, getting paid handsomely, and she's just having a lot of fun. And I think when you meet her, that just comes across, and, and also she's got, Paige it's sweet because she's got a bit of a vulnerability to her in the fact that I don't think she's overly confident at all. And I think that comes across on WWE TV quite often during her interviews. You can see that she's sort of second guessing herself and, just questioning herself a little bit. And I think, I just think that's nice. And I love that she's British as well.
I love the fact that she has to tell kind of the ring announcers how to say Norwich as well. I find that quite funny.
Yeah, what did she say in the interview? She said,
it's Norwich.
Yeah, and so she corrects them by saying, think of porridge,
that's right.
It's Norwich.
Yes.
So that's the way she teaches the Americans how to pronounce it. So that's pretty cool.
So as a link-in, I've got a good question for you. I'd love to know, like, living or dead, who would be your ultimate podcast interview? Who you would love to interview from past or present WWE, whether it be an interviewer, whether it be a wrestler, whether it be a ring announcer, who for you would be your number one?
It's probably yourself. Okay. That's a tough one. Living or dead?
Shall I answer first, and then you can
go on. You give me yours first.
Okay. So if I could interview anybody to do with wrestling, living or dead, mine would be Gorilla Monsoon, because I was brought up with Gorilla. I still think I love JR, and a lot of people still talk about JR, but I still don't consider JR to be the greatest wrestling commentator. In my opinion, the greatest combo ever in pro wrestling is Jesse the Body Ventura and Gorilla Monsoon. So that is my answer.
That was a great partnership. In fact, me and Rob, who I have on the show each week, we were talking about that. Not on the show, weirdly. We were just in the office talking about commentators, and I was saying, for me, just because I really, as I said, I started loving wrestling when I was young, kind of 6 or 7. But when I sort of really understood the business more was when I was a teenager, and that was when the Attitude Era hit. And so then, I really identified with the likes of Steve Austin and, people like that. And so that was a time when JR came into his own, and so for me, he's kind of the best commentator ever. Right. However, Rob was saying, he agreed with what you just said and said that Gorilla Monsoon, hands down, if you actually listen to what he's saying during the matches, he is the best commentator they've ever had.
I just think there's something next level with Gorilla Monsoon, because the storytelling in the match and the way that he would sell the wrestlers, and he'd basically be telling you who to cheer for and care for, but I just loved him, and his take on things as well. Like, he would tell a story, he would have a laugh with Jesse, and it would just work on a whole different level. A bit like the King and JR, I think that's why it works for me.
Yeah, he was funny, man, as well. He was really funny, Gorilla Monsoon. And I loved some of his expressions. This place has gone bananas.
It's a happening and all that kind of stuff,
He was a legend. I haven't actually answered the question, have I?
Oh, sorry, go ahead, yes.
No, I'm still trying to think. I mean, one of my all-time favourites is Shawn Michaels.
Legend.
Just phenomenal, just in terms of his in-ring ability. Obviously, everything he did in the ring was so smooth, but just just his selling, you know. I mean, everyone always says it, but you can feel his pain, you know. When you watch him sell, you go through the ride with him. So I mean, he would be a great guest, and there is actually talk of getting him on the show because he's got his new book out, so he might be coming onto Gorilla Position to plug that essentially. But that would be really awesome. I mean, sort of Steve Austin, really, which I know sounds really obvious because I guess people are so familiar with him and people can catch him twice a week on both his podcasts, and I've actually interviewed him a few times,
yes.
But it's only been kind of short 5-10 minute chats where I'd love to sit down with him, open up some IPAs and just have a laugh, just get a bit drunk with him, get him singing because he loves his country music.
You could give him a real ale tour of the, you know.
No, exactly. It'd be awesome, you know. And he likes his country music. So do I. Feel like we could have a bit of a sing along. It's just I think he's one of these people that I just want to be mates with. I think that basically sums it up.
I absolutely love Steve Austin, James. He's my favourite wrestler of all time, and I'll tell you why. It's because, like you, I've watched wrestling so many years, but I've never, ever, ever in the history of professional wrestling watched a crowd light up as to when Steve Austin, that glass would break, that music would hit, and he would come out. I've never heard a crowd reaction ever like that, you know?
Can you remember and pinpoint the best Stone Cold pop of all time? Because I clearly have it in my head when it was. And if you say the same one, that's saying something.
I can remember. Are we talking matches or just plain interviews?
Just a moment of him coming through the curtain when the glass breaks.
I'll tell you the one moment that I've literally heard a crowd pop, and I've never heard it so loud in my entire life, was the first time, not the second, the third, or the fourth, but the very first time that he was in front of Vince McMahon and he stunned him, and I've never heard a reaction like that before.
Yeah, that was amazing. Madison Square Garden, I think.
Yes.
So that New York crowd, they loved it. My moment, I don't know what arena it was at all, and I wasn't there. I wish I was, but it was the Raw in, I think, January '99, and it was that famous one where Tony Schiavone over on WCW said, over on the pre-taped WWF Raw, Mankind's about to win their world title. And then it's that famous story of, I think, 375,000 people then switched over the channel to watch the match. And it was Mankind versus The Rock. And there was like, I want to say the Authority, not the corporation, that's it, at ringside, and the rest of D-Generation X at ringside. And they were all brawling. The match was amazing. And The Rock was cheating. And basically Stone Cold turned up unannounced and the glass smashed.
Yes.
And the crowd reaction. I mean, if you look at it on YouTube, it's the most breathtaking thing. Like the arena shakes and the cameras are shaking, and it's just phenomenal.
So we have to talk NXT because I absolutely adore NXT as a product, and I can't help but kind of get swept away with it. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether that's a small arena or whether it's the quality of the wrestlers involved. But how do you feel about NXT? And please tell us about the Performance Center as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Performance Center is an amazing place. I've been there twice, and it's just beautiful facilities. You know,
right.
this incredible sort of, it's not a warehouse, it's like this beautiful building, and it's got the ring area where there's 7 different rings, I believe. They've got the kind of soft rings where they can practice their aerial maneuvers. There's what they call a TV ring, so it's kind of set up with a ramp and an entranceway, just like a WWE live event, and they have cameras on it, so the performers can kind of, rehearse, because it's easier said than done going to a ring and not only pandering to a crowd, but also to the hard cameras and stuff. So they learn all that kind of stuff. And then there's lots of different training rings in that area. And then there's amazing gym facilities. There's this area where they can just hang out and watch WWE DVDs and have a coffee. There's food bar and drinks bar. And it's an amazing facilities for these young guys to go and learn the craft. And they're all trained by legends of the business. When we go there, we always see like Billy Gunn and Bill DeMott. the other names are going to escape me now, but they're just legends of the business that you've seen growing up, and they're just there training these new guys. And so it's an amazing facility.
Out of who you've met from the NXT roster, because I believe you've done an NXT special on your podcast as well. So who would you kind of say is kind of the nicest people from the wrestling side of NXT?
Do you know what? They're all really nice.
Really? Yeah.
From what I can gather, you go there and you're sent in and you have a sort of 10, 15 minute chat with these people, who I know, I say relatively well, as in we've filmed with him quite a few times, and we actually, for MTV, we did a shoot when they were in the UK in November. We actually went to his mum's house in Newcastle, and we filmed, we basically followed him around for a day. So we went to his old gym, we went to his mum's house, we went to St James's Park football stadium, because he's obviously a Newcastle United fan. So we were with him all day, and he's a really lovely, down to earth guy, just incredibly humble and very, I don't know, he just feels lucky to be where he is. He's such a talent. So I mean, he sticks out as being a really nice guy. But then everyone, Finn Balor gave us a great interview, and he's just fun. He's got that Irish charm. He's just really funny, and just incredibly talented. Just an unbelievable performer. But everyone, like Charlotte Flair, Rick's daughter, was lovely, very emotional. She kind of seemed a little bit on the edge during our interview, where she talked about Triple H helping her so much, and talked about her dad and obviously her brother Reed, who passed away a couple of years ago. But everyone seems really nice, and what I just love about being down at NXT and going down to Full Sail and going to the arena is just, I think the best word I could use to describe it is freedom. I think they're given the freedom to perform how they want to perform. There's no kind of shackles put on them. They don't have to work a particular style. Triple H, he's a lot of things, but first and foremost, he's a fan of this business. And it's just so obvious when you watch the NXT product. He loves the old school. He loves the slow build. He loves the simple personal storylines and the chases for titles and the programs that run for months and months as opposed to just a couple of weeks and then it's gone. So I just think they're given a lot of freedom down there. There's not too much programming. It's an hour a week, which is perfect. It's not 3 hours, which is far too much. So I think they're in an amazing position, a really enviable position. And it's kind of like, it's like an old ECW arena, but with brilliant production values. And that's kind of the dream, I think.
So I know on your very, very first episode, you got hold of Stephanie McMahon, which must have been amazing. How did it feel?
I didn't get hold of her. I'd love to get hold of her. But,
you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
How did it feel to talk to Steph, and how did you find her as a person?
Well, it's really weird actually, because that conversation happened over the Christmas holidays,
right?
And I spoke to Stephanie. I had my laptop with me, I had my audio recording equipment with me, and I was sat in my car at night time on my parents' driveway down in Sussex. So it's really the most unglamorous thing. It's basically in my parents' house, because obviously I was seeing them over Christmas, and they've got no phone reception in their house. So I had to go out to the car and sit in the car and speak to Stephanie. So it was a bit surreal, just thinking, bloody hell, the chief brand officer of WWE, Vince's daughter, is speaking to me while I'm in my car on my parents' driveway. But she was really nice. I mean, we had, I'm sure she had things that she wanted to say. She had things that she wanted to promote, and that kind of stuff is fairly obvious. What we're doing is essentially press for them, and it's an opportunity for them to get on a platform and promote what they want to promote. And so I'm sure some of the things she said was, kind of pre-planned, and there were a couple of stories that she told me which I knew she had told other people as well. But she was lovely. She was really personable, quite funny. She got very emotional when she was talking about Connor, the young boy who passed away just after WrestleMania, one of their Make-A-Wish children. And that whole story, I think, really kind of affected her quite deeply. And she was nice. She was just very relaxed and very easy to talk to, actually. I kind of think halfway through the interview, I'd sort of really relaxed into it and forgot that it was Stephanie, the girl that I used to watch on Raw and really fancy.
So I know your latest interview is on the podcast with William Regal, and I absolutely adore William Regal. I love him as a character. So how did you find William, and then what was he like kind of one-on-one?
He was amazing in the fact that he gave us all the time we needed. We were backstage at a SmackDown taping.
Right.
And he was, I don't think he's the busiest guy there. I think he's very much kind of overseeing the sort of talent scouting side of things. So yes. He probably has days, I guess at TV tapings where he has to watch people come in and do tryout matches and stuff. And I know he travels an awful lot. Just after we spoke to him, I think he flew to India to do some tryouts with some athletes over there. Right. But he was so giving of his time. He said, we can do this for as long as you need. There were no time limits put on it. We sat down for an hour and a half and he just talked about his career, told some really funny stories. And he's just very, he's very different. And I even told him this, you interview someone like The Miz, who's, equally as lovely, but a very different character. He's very loud and very gaudy and just quite in your face, in a fun way, but he's always switched on. Whereas someone like William Regal is just very calm and considered and just has a really funny way about him. He's just, just a really humorous guy and very down to earth. He's definitely a British chap.
Well, I got to say, man, it's been an absolute honour to talk to you because I love the podcast and you seem a really nice guy. So I think I could talk wrestling with you all day, man.
Oh, well, you too. And I mean, that's the thing. Whenever I talk to somebody and we end up talking about the business and, the different personalities of the business and how it works and how you book things and,
yes.
The upcoming events, you just hours fly by and you think, oh God, we've been talking for so long. So, it's very easy to do, but thanks so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
I very much appreciate it. I'd love to have you back again if you didn't mind, later on in the year maybe.
Yeah, man, let's keep in touch. That'd be awesome.
James, it's been a real honour, man. Do you want to tell everybody where they can catch Gorilla Position and what's coming up and that kind of stuff?
Podcast drops every Wednesday. You can get it on various platforms. If you go to talksport.com and go to the podcast section on the homepage, you'll find it in there. Or you can go to talksport.com/WWE, and that's like a hub of kind of activity, and we keep it updated with regular WWE news stories and features and stuff. And you can stream the podcast from there, or you can obviously go to iTunes and type in Gorilla Position and we'll be there. Audio Boom as well, type in Gorilla Position, we're there. So many ways you can listen to it, and I'm on Twitter as well, at JDScoop82.
That has been James Delow, I've been Carl Eggert, and you have been listening to Monday Night Carlo. We'll catch you down the road.
Cheers!
Why not come and like the official Monday Night Carlo Facebook page, facebook.com/EggerCarlMNC. That's facebook.com/EGGETTCARLMNC.
You've been listening to Monday Night Carlo. All views and opinions expressed by the Carlo are all his own and do not represent any other entity.